Yo! You know, I wonder how much different this show would have been if I decided on a fake plastic skull as my sidekick instead of an actual brick as my sidekick. Fundamentally, at its core, it would probably be just the same exact show, except every video would just be about Brooke then, right? Alright, so hey everybody, how you doing? Teching and Barry and Scully hanging out today. Brooke's here too. Hey Brooke, it's always nice to have you on the show. How you doing, Brooke? What's up? What's new with you? I hear that new album's dropping this December. It's a Christmas album, of course. I would totally buy that, seriously. If they released, like, the voice actor for Brooke released a Christmas album. It's just Brooke singing like different like rock-based Christmas carols. You know, I would buy that in a heartbeat. I don't care. That needs to exist, right? But anyway, yeah. This is a Horroween video, I guess. Horroween didn't really happen much this year. Happened more than last year because we just didn't do it last year. But this year, you know, 2 videos. Tomorrow is, of course, October 31st, Halloween proper. But I got something a little bit special planned for tomorrow. Not exactly One Piece related, but I'm sure you guys will enjoy it. So, you know, tune in then. So every Halloween, I gotta make a Brooke video. At least one, alright? And this is something, I got a tweet this morning about this. You know, hey, Teching, you should do a video on Brooke's Awakening. And you know what? I've kind of already done that way back in, like, you know, 2017, I think. I did a video on the Yomi Yomi no Mi, and I mentioned, I think, the Awakening there. I've sprinkled it around in some other videos. I get a lot of requests to talk about awakenings of devil fruits, okay? But, you know, beyond all of them, Brooke is the one I get the most. I think it's just because of the fact that Brooke's fruit is so weird, and going along with that, he has these extra powers that he unlocked, you know, after the time skip, being able to allow, like, his soul to leave his skeleton body, and then during Totland, you know, he takes out the guitar and he strums it, and this, like, skull demon is like, whoa, 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 whoa. So that gets some people thinking, like, is Brooke already awakened? If he's not awakened, what would it be like? You know, because it's literally the power to bring back the dead. So I think a lot of people get it like, oh, Brooke's awakening, you know, awakenings of devil fruits allow you to affect the world around you, so therefore maybe his awakening is allowed to, like, bring other people back from the dead or something. Or is it the thing we already saw where he's able to just, like, output his soul power, like just the soul power he has now, being able to extend it into soul solid and freeze people with the grisly grip of the underworld. That might just be his awakening in and of itself. So, alright, I mean, I've mentioned this before a few times, but let's just do a whole video dedicated to Brooke's awakening, alright? Now, this actually is good because I've made some other videos before this, you know, after I talked about the Yomi Yomi, where I'm talking about awakenings, and I arrived at that one conclusion, and it's not, you know, set in stone or anything like that, it's just something I noticed, and that's that whenever we do get to see characters, now these are canon characters in the manga, we're not talking about movie characters or fillers or anything like that. In the canon of the manga, when we have a character that has awakened a devil fruit, so right now it's basically just Doflamingo and Katakuri, something to note is that both of those individuals have had their devil fruits for a very, very long time. Dofi is in his early 40s and Katakuri's in his late 40s, and they've both had their devil fruits since when they were, like, little kids, okay? And so that got me thinking, I'm like, alright, maybe awakening a devil fruit is connected to how long you've had the devil fruit. Maybe that also might notice, because Doflamingo mentioned that he's like, oh, okay, you know, not everybody awakens the devil fruit. It's kind of a rare thing. It might be a thing where not all devil fruits are able to awaken, or, at the very least, the awakening of one devil fruit may not be equivalent to the awakening of another fruit. I don't really think that, like, let's take Katakuri's, for instance. Katakuri has the Mochi Mochi no Mi. He can make mochi. When he awakens the power, he can turn the ground and everything into mochi. So, he can create a substance, and in the awakening, he can create, you know, the substance around him. He can turn houses, or the ground, or trees, or things into mochi, okay? I don't think that awakening would be the same level as, like, the awakening of the jacket fruit. I really do think, now you could always say it's not about the devil fruit, it's about the user, and how they train, and how they utilize their ability, but when it comes to awakening powers, I really do think it's the luck of the draw. You know, Doflamingo got an ability that allowed him to manipulate string, so his awakening is, of course, being able to turn the entire world around him into string. Let's compare that to something like, let's talk about Robin's fruit, the Hana Hana no Mi, really quick. Like, you know, she's already able to create hands all around her and body parts wherever she wants, so what would her awakening be exactly? Instead of, you know, being able to sprout her hands on a house, she literally turns the entire house into her hand? I don't know, I think when it comes to certain devil fruits, awakenings are a lot more abstract than the ones we've seen so far. So that got me thinking, maybe not every devil fruit is even capable of awakening, right? But then we get to Brook, okay? Then we get to Brook. The Yomi Yomi no Mi Revive fruit allows you to come back from the dead and get a second chance at life. Also, it allows you to apparently tap into the powers of the underworld and use this power to, like, channel ice, you know, streams into your blades and, you know, freeze your enemies solid. So that's a thing. One thing that always bugged me was that Brook was by himself on a ship for 50 years as a skeleton. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, Brook. You know? He comes on a talk show. Hey, Brook, how you doing? Welcome to the show. Welcome. That's, by the way, if the YouTube thing doesn't work out in my late 50s, I want to be a late-night talk show host. That's my other career choice if that ever works out, because I would love that. But anyway, it's like, yeah, Brook, how you doing? What's that new album dropping? Oh, well, you know, I really wanted to talk about all those lonely decades when I was aboard that ship with my, you know, rotting, you know, crewmates that died. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Talk about the album, Brook. You know, okay. But, you know, he was on that ship for 50 years by himself, and then he meets the Straw Hats for like a couple of weeks, honestly, before they got separated again at Sabaody, and then he trains for 2 years. Not even really training. I mean, he does train. I do believe Brook did train in his downtime with his sword. He got his sword sharpened by the Long Arm tribe and everything like that. But most of the time, he was spending it, you know, writing music, you know, thinking of his new outfit, you know, learning how to, like, strum that guitar, you know, throwing concerts, having big events and everything like that. And the way that Brook explained this was that some point over the time skip, his albums were not selling very well. He kind of had a lull there, and his, like, he hit really big at first, like, whoa, that's the Soul King, and then give it like 10 months, and it's like, yeah, that second album really sucks, man. You know, Bone to Be Wild, that was his one-hit wonder, maybe that's just his thing. I don't know, man, I'm not feeling this second album. And Brook was like, I don't know what to do, and he started praying, and when he prayed, that's when he figured out, oh, wait a second, I could get my soul out of my body, and it's like, you know, ethereal and intangible, and I can travel around and go through solid objects and stuff. Okay, so few things about this that are strange. I highly doubt that in the 50 years that Brook was on that ship, Brook never once decided to pray. I mean, that would be the time you think he would do it the most, right? After maybe about, you know, probably not even after about like a year or a month. Probably after like 2 days of being stuck as a skeleton afloat in the Florian Triangle with all of your dead crewmates, you know, all their skeletons around you. You'd be like, oh, please, someone, Eneru, Usopp, I don't even know who you are, but please help me. You'd think, like, if that was all it took, you know, it would have happened a long time ago, right? So what exactly what was the thing that triggered it? What was the thing that really, you know, kicked it off? Now, you could say also that Brook had been, at that point, you know, 50 years ago, he was, like, really depressed, and he's just like, there's nothing for me. I'm just gonna float on this boat for all eternity, right? He didn't really have any reason to train or to try to understand his power better. He was just stuck in that position, and he really just, you know, got stuck in this mire, this melancholy, you know? But then the Straw Hats showed up and rescued him from everything, got his shadow back from Moria, and he's joining their crew, and he's like, I'm finally doing something. I have a goal. I'm gonna meet Laboon again. I'm gonna travel with the Straw Hats. I'm gonna get stronger for their sake. I'm gonna fight for their sake. I'm gonna sing for their sake, you know? So during that time skip, it's like Brook had a whole new outlook on life. It's like, okay, now I'm gonna actively try to train to get a little bit stronger, and then he awoke in his Devil Fruit, or he got these new powers from his Devil Fruit power. Like, they could have always been there, but he didn't really realize it until then. That is, once again, something that I'm kind of dubious about, because remember, a few years before the Straw Hats showed up at the Florian Triangle, Brook ran aground at Thriller Bark, okay? And then he was walking around Thriller Bark, and he was still really strong at that point. So I feel like if all that Brook did on the ship was just lay around and not do anything for like 40-something years until he finally ran aground at Thriller Bark, you know, he wouldn't be strong. He would just be like, comatose. He would just be like, I don't even care anymore. It's been 40-something years I've been floating around the damn Florian Triangle. Whatever, I don't care. You know, like, so I think to pass the time, if nothing else, Brook was training on the ship. I think he was training a little bit with his sword, you know, he had to keep that shit sharpened for 50 years, you know, he had to keep care for it at least a little bit, right? He didn't need to eat, he didn't need to sleep, but his weapons still need to be cared for, and as we learned later on, when Brook first arrived at Thriller Bark, he was a bona fide badass! Get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? I'm just gonna wait. Do you get it? Bona fide do you get it? Okay, so anyway, we good? We good? Is the laughter finally subsided? Okay, good. All right. But he was such a bona fide badass. Like, he was cutting down freaking zombies, and he figured out salt was their weakness. He's going around massacring zombies and shit. Like, they were actually kind of scared of them. Some of the zombies on Thriller Bark were actually still having, like, post-traumatic stress from Brook. And they'd be like, oh, the skeleton, not the skeleton again, you know? So, like, I think Brook was training on the ship for a while, keeping his weapon intact, and when he finally landed at Thriller Bark, he's like, oh, zombies everywhere, I must fight them, and I discovered the weakness is salt, okay, I'm gonna fight them. And then finally Ryuma showed up, and then Ryuma was too strong for Brook to handle. Yeah, he had Shadow Stone and everything got put in Ryuma, and then Ryuma beat down Brook, and then he had to retreat back to his ship, okay? Now, I can't remember how long that was before the Straw Hats arrived, but that was a few years, okay? So a few more years of Brook, now without a shadow, traveling around the Florian Triangle. I think, and when finally, when the Straw Hats invited Brook on their ship and they arrived at Thriller Bark again, Brook was super pumped. He was like, yes, finally, I got back on the island. Now I could go get my shadow back. He's like, yo! And he jumps to the island. That proves right there that Brook, for those years in between when he fought Ryuma and the Straw Hats, he was getting invigorated. He's like, I want to get back to Thriller Bark. I want to fight that samurai Ryuma again. I want to get my shadow back. Okay, so I think once again, those few years before the Straw Hats showed up, yeah, he might have spent some days like, I don't want to do anything. But mostly, I think he was training, and on the off chance, we don't know when, something is going to happen. He's going to land at Thriller Bark again, and then he has another shot. All right, so he had to train to get a little stronger. And I think he even mentioned this to Ryuma when they fought the second time. And, you know, Ryuma still won, but he's like, you know, I've been training, I can do this. And then Zoro, of course, had to kind of show up and fight Ryuma for him. But yeah, so 50 years, and the last chunk of that, him training, you know, seriously to be better than Ryuma to get his shadow back, still didn't do anything with the Devil Fruit. Weird. Very strange that he didn't awaken any of these powers in the meantime. So I don't think it's like the lack of training or anything, or the lack of a goal or an ambition, all right? I feel like there's something else going on here a little bit. Now, is what Brook is capable of doing right now considered an awakening? Well, just because his Devil Fruit is the ability to bring people, well, bring at least one person back from the dead, I don't think that necessarily means that his awakening has to do that on a large scale. It just projects his power outward, okay? Plus, I think having an ability that would allow him to bring other people back from the dead, that's kind of OP. That's kind of ridiculous to just have that power, or even if it's like something like I can only bring back one other person, I mean, that'd still be pretty powerful to do. I mean, look at what happened with just Law's ability, the internal youth operation. That has to give up his life. So I don't know. I don't think that's the direction Oda's going with it. I think the direction Oda might be going with it is like, okay, we have a Devil Fruit that can revive you, but it can also, you know, mess with, like, cosmic forces or whatever, basically. Because it's like Brook is, like, the energies... I did a whole video about Brook's body. Like, there has to be some sort of energy source, like, tethering him to this world. And it's, like, accessing the underworld and, like, forcibly drawing this ethereal ectoplasmic ability power to keep him alive and to keep his body, like, put together in one thing, because he's literally a skeleton. He has no muscles or no skin or anything. So there's some, like, I think ethereal, like, otherworldly power tethering him to this world, which is his soul. And Brook mentions it's like having this soul power is basically the thing that allows me to channel the underworld power of ice and, like, cold. You know, I'm like, I am an abomination utilizing power from hell and the underrealm. Powers not which humans were meant to know. That alone is badass, alright? That alone is awesome. I would love it if it's already been revealed that this is Brook's awakening. Just the ability to channel the underworld powers and project it outwards in his soul and in his ice. That's an awakening. Strum the guitar, giant, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's his awakening, right? But Brook doesn't know it's an awakening, okay? It's not like when you eat a Devil Fruit and you instantly know the name of the fruit. Like when Ace, you know, ate the Mera Mera, he's like, this is the Mera Mera, this is the fire, this is the Flame fruit, right? So I don't think it's like that when you awaken a fruit, you instantly know, like, pinged in your brain, like, ping! Brook's case, it would be ping! I've awakened my Devil Fruit now. Like, you've leveled up. So I don't think it's like that, and, you know, Brook is kind of out of the loop for a little while anyway, so, you know, if he awakened his fruit, it's not like he would immediately know that, right? But that would be interesting to know if later on in the story we encounter Vegapunk or we encounter somebody else that could like talk a little bit more and understand a little bit more about Devil Fruit Awakenings, like Brook never directly fought Katakuri or anything. That would have been actually kind of interesting if Brook directly fought Katakuri and Katakuri noticed is like, oh, you awakened your powers too. And Brook's like, I did? Oh, yo, ho, 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 that's interesting. I didn't know that, you know? Also the fact, I mean, hey, Brook managed to defeat all those chess soldiers, and he went up against Big Mom, you know? I'm thinking maybe part of the reason he was able to last as long as he did was because of those powers, because let's think about this. Pre-time skip, Brook had a little bit of that stuff where he could like play his music and it could affect other people, like when they were fighting the Flying Fish Riders and he played that lullaby melody and it actually did make the Flying Fish Riders fall asleep. So he could do a little bit of that soul stuff, but I don't think he really understood the full breadth of it. If Brook went up against Big Mom, you know, without having his soul solid, you know, the ice sword or whatever, and being able to like defeat all those chess soldiers with just a strum of his guitar, I don't think Brook would have made it as far. So that's something you could say to Brook, like the reason Brook went one-on-one against Big Mom, even not maybe Big Mom directly, but against the chess soldiers and the homies like Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon, the reason he was able to get so far was because he was an awakened Yomi Yomi no Mi user, which just makes Brook all the more badass that he went like against Big Mom directly and her homies like 4 against 1, and he was able to last as long as he did, and he was able to even like slice Prometheus's cheek. I don't think he would have been able to do that pre-time skip, right? So it might have been a thing with Brook where it just took a really long time having his fruit. He had it for, actually, he had it even longer than 50 years because we don't know exactly, I think, when he ate the fruit. We know Brook initially died when he was 38 years old, and then 50 years happened, and then 2 more years happened for the time skip, and then when he's finally 90. But he could have eaten the fruit when he was in his 30s, 20s, teenager, you know, he could have eaten it a long, long time ago, right? So maybe it's also a thing, like, if we are going along with the logic of, you know, maybe the devil fruit has to have a certain amount of years or time inside of the user, maybe it's different for every fruit. Or maybe it depends on how you utilize it, or how much you train in it or something. The big thing, the big hang-up with this that always comes up at some point, and I've mentioned it before, I'll mention it again here, like if there really is, it has to have years or decades using the fruit, what about Luffy? You know, Luffy is not in his 40s or his 90s, you know, and I think Luffy is probably going to awaken the Gomu Gomu no Mi by the end of the story. I would assume that would happen. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to, but I would assume it would. I would like that to be what Gear 5th would be. Gear 5th is Luffy's awakening. And in which case, Luffy, he's, you know, well, he has had his fruit for a while. He's had his fruit for about 12 years. He's also utilized it a lot. In fact, he's overutilized his fruit. He's really pushed the limits with that. So that you could, he's the main character. You could always come up with some loophole to that. I'm not saying, you know, like every, like Robin has to awaken, Chopper has to awaken, although Monster Point Chopper might be an artificial awakening, something like that. Luffy eats a Rumble Ball and awakens. I think there could be some way you could spin it with Luffy. Like, okay, Luffy, normally it takes like 20-something years minimum to awaken a devil fruit, but because you've been just absolutely reckless with the way you've utilized yours, you know, you've been pushing it to the limit for the last 12 damn years, you know, Gear 2nd, Gear 3rd, Gear 4th, freaking King Kong gun after King Kong gun, like, you've been overexerting this so much, you've literally cut time off of your lifespan for this, but if there's one positive that came out of that, it's you also get an awakening earlier because of how much you've strained your body with it. So that's the way you can kind of spin it with Luffy. But beyond Luffy, I don't think there's any other character in the story that, like, needs to have an awakening. But if Brook really, truly does have an awakening right now, maybe he could teach Luffy something. Not teach him, like, Luffy, this is how you do it. But, you know, if someone tells him, like, oh yeah, like, they meet somebody and they're talking about awakening fruits. I'm like, yeah, Straw Hats, this is how an awakening fruit works. Maybe they'll run into Katakuri again, and he's an ally now, and Katakuri will explain it a little bit to them. Whatever. Straw Hats meet them. And then they find out, wait a second, being able to extend the power outside of the fruit, I mean, outside of your body, you know, Doflamingo told me something like that, and Katakuri, you know, he was able to do something like that too. And then Brook is like, wait a second, I could do that with my Yomi Yomi. And they're like, well, you can? It's like, yeah, watch. And he can, like, make the soul go out, and he can, I shot my chainsaw, and he can make his soul go out, and he could do the soul power and, like, the ice thing, and, you know, they could look at it and be like, you know, devil fruits are all different. You know, when it comes to Logias and zones, it might be easier to tell if you have an awakening. Like, I think an easy way to tell with a Logia is if you have an awakening, you're able to affect the weather, like Aokiji and Akainu did at Punk Hazard. Like, that's a really easy way to determine if you're an awakened Logia. If you're an awakened zone, you have that, you know, like the prison guards or maybe Chopper's Monster Point. Like, that's a very distinct shape that Crocodile was instantly able to know at Impel Down. Those are all awakened zone users. Like, I can just tell. But Paramecia is going to be maybe a little bit trickier because their powers are so out there. Every single one is so different. There's no standard. There's no immediate standard. You know, now granted, the two devil fruits that we've known so far that have an awakening, the Ito Ito and the Mochi Mochi, are both Paramecia, but they had similar effects. Dofi can make string, Katakuri can make mochi. But what about other devil fruits like the jacket fruit that doesn't make anything, it just turns you into a jacket? What about Mansherry's Heal fruit? You know, would Mansherry's Heal fruit, when it's awakened, would she be able to just, the same basic ability, just over a wider range? Is that all it is? Maybe that would happen with Robin, just increasing her range a bit? Would that be all it is? Maybe for some Paramecia it is. Some Paramecias, all it does when you awaken is increase your range. Other Paramecias allow you to turn objects and things into your element. Other Paramecias give you some other kind of effect. Maybe other fruits don't have them at all. You know, I don't know. I have no idea how this awakening crap works, but considering Brook's nature and everything, and with his abilities that we've shown so far, I would be okay with him being an awakened. In fact, I've kind of convinced myself just over the course of this video. You know, if it isn't an awakening what he has right now, being able to channel the power of the underworld outward, what else could it be, really? I mean, yeah, we could go back to the reviving the dead thing, but I think that's a little bit too broken for this story, and I don't think that's where we're gonna go with it. And if it isn't reviving the dead, and it isn't what we've seen so far, I mean, the only other angle I can take this is just taking the underworld crap even further. Like, Brook can maybe not revive the dead, like, oh no, you know, oh no, Usopp just died. Just, you know, Brook lays his hands on Usopp. He's like, come back to us, godly soul. And then Usopp's soul returns. You revived me, Brook! Maybe not like that. Oh. Brook walks into a graveyard. I know this sounds like a setup for a really bad joke, but it isn't. Brook walks into a graveyard, strums his guitar. Underworld soul energy permeates the soil. And he's not bringing the dead back to life in the traditional sense, like, you know, live again. He's, like, making, like, puppets. You know, he's using the underworld power to animate other bones and making, like, dolls. Like undead skeletal soldiers to fight on his behalf. You know, like, so it's not the zombie, he's not making zombies, so it doesn't cross over to the Kage. These skeletons would not have their own agency, would not have, you know, like the zombies at Thriller Bark were able to talk, you know, these ones wouldn't be able to do that. He's literally just reanimating corpses as, like, you know, putting their, like, demonic aura, his underworld aura over them and just animating them and have them, like, pick up, like, axe or shields and, like automatons and fight for his behalf or something. That would, maybe that's something, like reviving the dead and using the underworld powers without it being too broken. So he can't, you know, bring back somebody from the dead if they actually died, but he can, like, animate their body and use it as, like, as he sees fit. Maybe something like that. Maybe, but, you know, that would be a cool ability. Yeah, that's what I got. But for right now, I would be perfectly fine if we revealed later. And that'd be a good twist. That would be a good twist. Like, oh yeah, Brook had an awakening the whole time. It's just he didn't know it was an awakening, and none of the other Straw Hats knew it was an awakening, but he is awakened. And it makes sense given how long he's had his power, right? So, I'm trying to find that common denominator, that common thread that's like, what makes Katakuri, Doflamingo, and Brook maybe all in common to connect the dots? And one thing I definitely can come up with is, like, they've had their fruits for a very long time. Brook, the longest out of all of them, easily the longest out of all of them, because Brook's had it for a minimum of 50 years, minimum of like 52, 53 years, and, you know, Katakuri and Dofi aren't even that old yet, so yeah. I'm just saying, I think it makes sense. So, anyway, that's my video on Brook's Awakening. I hope I answered some of your questions. Let me know in the comments below how you feel feel about this, if it's already an awakening or if it isn't, what it could be, and how that can really, you know, change the story later on. You know, if it's like, oh, Brooke's awakened, now what does that mean? So anyway, yeah, thanks for watching, and have a good, well, have a good All Hallows Eve, and tomorrow, that's right, we're doing a video on Nanatsu no Taizai.